The Central Bank of Nigeria today raised the country's policy rate by 150 basis points to 14%, in line with a similar hike at its last meeting in May, as headwinds to rising inflation and sluggish economic growth continue unabated. But the season of high interest rates is not over yet, even as the financial regulator promised to continue to use the use of its development finance tools to moderate prices and sustain output growth. And the Rise business anchor Bolson Omofai reports.
One member voted to increase the MPR by 150 basis points, 6 members by 100 basis points, 1 member by 75 basis points, and 3 members by 50 basis points. Consequently, the committee resolved to increase the MPR by 100 basis points from 13% to 14%. And in summary, MPC voted as follows. 1. Increase MPR to 14% from 13. 2. Retain the asymmetric corridor at plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the MPR. 3. Retain the CRR at 27.5%. And 4. Retain liquidity ratio at 30%.
Today's interest rate hike by the Central Bank of Nigeria was well anticipated as the country's inflation jumps to a record high in June, led by food and core indexes, and output growth remains soft. For the 11-member Monetary Policy Committee members that met Monday and Tuesday this week, the background to their considerations and decisions were not significantly different from 2 months ago, when the policy rate was also raised by 150 basis points.
There is a need, not just because we want to look at what other economies are doing, but also the fear that whereas we are seeing some output growth as a result substantially of what we are doing in development finance, but that we need to really rein in inflation. We need to do a lot more work on inflation. And that is the reason, like I read at the communique, whether to tighten or to loosen on hold, MPC did not even take any look at the issue of whether to hold rates constant or to loosen, because we know some people would have expected that having tightened last time by 150 basis points, some of the analysis we've watched or read is that, look, we should not continue to increase rates because it will increase the cost of borrowing. Cost of borrowing by borrowers. It may also weaken manufacturing output and the rest of them. We agree with that postulation. But the important thing is that as long as we see inflation at a level that can retard growth, it must be dealt with, while at the same time we're looking at how do we use development finance tools to continue to push towards improved output growth.
The financial regulator believed that Nigeria is likely to face subdued growth this year on the back of uncertainties around global supply chains, corporate and public debt in development economies, the Ukraine war, and aggressive normalization in the advanced countries. Here at home, the CBN chief, Godwin Emefiele, says it will continue to use development finance tools and other measures to engineer steady output growth.
It is to the credit of the Buhari administration that we have, through these interventions, helped to impact positively on the lives of Nigerians. Yes, we have. During COVID-19, beginning around the period of the pandemic, we unveiled a couple of products. Is it the targeted credit facility, where people who are impacted, who could not work, who could not earn a living, got some little money, 500,000 naira, to set up their small businesses? Is it the AXMIs, where you want to set up a hairdressing salon, or a sewing business, or a barber shop, or a block making factory? You are able to access finance and you don't have to know anybody in CBN to access this facility. We have done a couple in agriculture, we have done in healthcare, all to see to how we can be less reliant on imported items. We have tried as much as possible to provide intervention to people who are producing goods that should be produced in Nigeria than importing them. We have succeeded today in stopping the importation of rice. When I became CBN governor, we were importing maize into Nigeria. We were importing all forms of cassava into Nigeria, cassava starch into Nigeria. We've started a program of reducing the import of wheat into Nigeria because we are aggressively also now ramping up on the production of wheat locally.
Looking forward, Nigeria's central bank is joining its counterparts around the world in their fight against rising inflation. And the major weapon is more interest rate hike into an unknown future.
The Monetary Policy Committee is very determined that if inflation continues at this rate, particularly aggressively, we would continue to tighten, because that is the only thing that I can say at this time. So whereas we're doing everything possible from CBN to look at the various other measures that can be used to moderate inflation, improving farming, hoping that farming outputs will be better, hoping that with that, when the harvest eventually sets maybe sometime around August or September, let's even say September, October, we may begin to see a moderation in food prices that will help to see to a moderation in inflation. If we do not do so, I cannot promise, MPC cannot promise anybody that we will not continue to increase rates.
It's benchmark interest rate.
Bosin Omofaye, Arise News.
Well, to discuss this development, we have Paul Alaje, an economist and senior partner at SPM Professionals, joining us from our Lagos studios. Thank you so much, Mr. Alaje, for joining us tonight on the news. Now, the CBN governor, as you heard him earlier say, this is to tackle inflation. But how much of this, will really tackle the rise in inflation? Do you agree with him?
Well, thank you so very much for having me. To some extent, I agree with the central bank governor. Monetary authority cannot watch to see inflation climb on top of the roof of the nation. The only thing inflation does is to take people from wealth into poverty, into penury, and to destabilize policies of government, and to ensure those who are holding political office today don't return. It's an invisible force that charter countries and destroy economy. There is nothing good about double-digit inflation, especially when you have inflation that has gotten to 18% as against the vision, the target of Nigerian Central Bank of 6 to 9% and global expectation of 3 to 5%. What we have is 18.6%, and projection reveals that this inflation may even get up to 20%.
Paul, how effective have the monetary policies been so far, and the development policy tools, have they been effective at all?
Well, they've done their bits. Monetary policy have done the bits that is expected. And I will talk a bit about the central bank's development policy. For instance, we've seen central bank intervene in grain availability or grain supply. If we're not central bank, I tell you, by now, Nigerians should be buying a bag of rice for 50 to 70,000. That does not mean buying bag of rice between 26 to about 35, 36,000 is right. But at least some things have been done. That is what I want to establish. Again, as monetary policy solve all the problem, if it has, we will not have the kind of report shared by the National Bureau of Statistics that inflation is increasing. Now, when you look, you first need to understand the kind of inflation that we have. Core inflation grew from about 11% to 13%, and food inflation reduced sluggish a little from 21 to 20%. We know that food inflation, one of the things that is really responsible for it is domestic issues, which has to do with insecurity, logistic issue, as well as Russia-Ukraine war, because we are unable to import some food, such as wheat and so on and so forth. But when you look at core inflation, the driving force is energy. So we are having what I call imported inflation. The price of diesel this time last year December was 300 naira. Today is over 800 naira. The last purchase I made this week was 830 naira per liter of diesel. What does that mean? It's going to affect everything that is supplied. But mark you, it's not only Nigeria that is experiencing such hike. Other countries that we are buying suit from, that we are buying any material from, that we use diesel to drive their production. Something is certain. They will push the costs on us, and that will now become what we are importing, which is imported inflation, or inflation import into our economy. And we are struggling from it. I don't think Monetary Authority can do much in that regard. That's why we have Ministry of Trade and Investment. What policy is coming? Ministry of Finance. What policy are we seeing? Each time we see activities like this, we doubt if there are really convergence in the policies of government, as it has to do with the Fiscal Authority, Trade Authority, and Monetary Authority in Nigeria. So you see Trade Authority saying, let's combat inflation. Who will be fighting for the soul of the GDP? The implication is that even if central bank continue to raise rates and we are not off, we don't close the tap, we leave the tap open, and we think that we can fetch as much as possible so that we can stop the flow. I doubt if that will be the solution. We don't know when Russia-Ukraine war will end, but we know that if it does not end, even though there is no missile landing in Lagos, Abuja, Kano, Port Harcourt, Sokoto, or Calabar, but the impact of destruction that is happening in Ukraine is felt in the homes, pockets, and lives of Nigerians because of not preparing for economic quagmire that now visits with us as a country.
Yeah, so commiserate fiscal stimulus is what you're talking about. But let me take you back to something you said earlier. My first question, I was asking you if you agreed with the CBN governor, and you said to some extent. So again, the measures, the previous interventions that the CBN had announced, do you think that perhaps we should have allowed time for those measures to permeate to the economy? And then what would be the impact of this on households, on businesses, small, on the capital market? What's the implication?
Quick fixes are very easy to say, but they don't solve real economic issue. Recall 2015, what was popular in the media was quick fixes and finding quick solutions. Central Bank have done the bit, I said, but I doubt if that will be enough. So what you have seen, they have said 1 for 5. If you bring $1, we're going to give you extra 5 naira. Has that saved the exchange rate of Nigeria? What you have seen at parallel market is over 600 official market, and even official rate, we have even seen further fall as against the policy that monetary policy through Central Bank has mentioned that they were going to use to save the exchange rate concern. That has not been able. We have also heard that after political primaries, we are going to see reduction in FX, and there have been policy around that. Even we have seen the FCC pursue some politicians have gone to the field. Of course, as I speak to you today, Naira is still having free flow, both at the parallel market, even at official rates. So all of these policies are not enough. You see, until we are ready to develop this economy, and something must come first. Why do we import what we can produce? Significant proportion of our FX goes into import of crude oil. Why can't we conserve that locally by making refinery function? NNPC has just been made a commercial entity. Are we now going to have the refineries go into the hand of those that wants to make profit? And in the aim of making profit, they will be forced to produce, because without production, of course, profit is not going to come from anywhere. So for me, I think Central Bank has done the bit, but have they really succeeded in combating inflation? Or with the souls of Nigerian economy continue to receive several beatings in the hands of inflation, until we see that convergence from Fiscal Authority, Monetary Authority, Trade Authority coming together to say, fiscal, you need to make significant amount of power available for industrial zones, even though it's becoming impossible for you to make it available for all homes in Nigeria today.
Paul Alaje, I'm not sure we have 30 seconds, but some say that, look, to achieve price stability, reduce interest rates and increase government spending. Do you agree?
Well, if you want to achieve price stability, it depends on what is happening to price. We have continued to see increase in price. What you do is to actually increase interest rates, but that has a trade-off. Be ready to have a slower growth in the GDP. When GDP is lower, you have to measure what will be the implication on per capita income. When it is weaker, then you have breeding more poor people. That is why there is no safe haven for the golden fish. You want your economy to be better, there are no quick fixes. You need to pay for your economic sins. If not, they will continue to hurt you.
Paul Alaje, thank you so much. And no safe heavens for goldfishes. Well, thank you so much for your analysis tonight on the news. We do appreciate your time, as always.